Those stories, the John Henry Clark. Those stories, tap dancer Honey Coles. Those stories, they stayed with me. They became part of me. And it was without even listening to them, that is where I wanted to return, to the point of the story and its intersectionality, its ability to motivate and change the course of someone's life.
That should work out pretty well.
People have come from all over the country here today to be with you today. San Francisco, Chicago, Atlanta, D.C., New York, and of course your hometown, Los Angeles. We want you to learn about a life outside of your own, a world that is full of possibilities. We want you to learn of all the careers and choices that are available to you. It's a big world out there. And someone here actually has lived your story and will be able to show you that the world is full of possibilities, your own possibilities.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Movement in Motion.
I want to especially thank our co-chairs, Singleton McAllister, Emmett McHenry, Herb and Sharon Wilkins, Marie and Wendell Johns, and Dwight and Toni Cook Bush. In fact, Toni Cook Bush, we love her. She's not only a friend, she's a supporter, she's a critic. She keeps me on task all the time, and she's our favorite board member. We shouldn't have favorites, but she is. I also want to acknowledge Amy Billingsley, who's our hardest working regional coordinator of the regions. Amy, will you And I'd also like to acknowledge Janelle Trader and Walter Hill of the National Archives, both of whom work for us tirelessly. They both serve on our advisory board. And I'd also like to acknowledge Paul Brock, who's one of our history makers. And the reason I want to acknowledge him is he's been helping us interview Black Hollywood. And as we are entering the 21st century, and we look back at the African American community 30 years after slavery, this is the early 1900s when our community was forming a lot of the organizations that are now will be celebrating their 100th anniversary. And it started 5 years ago, and it's going to continue for another 15 years. So whether it's the NAACP or the Urban League or the Lynx or the Boulay or the Girlfriends, or all the other organizations that even some people who are not African American really don't know about, but they form the basis of our community. This year, we have lost several of our history makers. Ossie Davis, Earl Neal, Tyrone Davis, James Foreman, Milton Davis, Dr. Samuel Massey we just lost, and Bertram Miles. But we also lost Johnny Cochran, Ray Charles, Bobby Short. In fact, Diane Carroll just came here from Bobby Short's memorial service. And unfortunately, we were not able to interview any of them. And as someone who has sat through interviews, I can only tell you that my staff, and there's 6 people now doing interviews around the country, that we are constantly struck by the richness of our experience and the depth of it and how many areas that we have touched in American history. We have now done interviews in over 80 cities in the United States. In fact, my crew is dying to travel to Mexico to interview Elizabeth Catlett and to Sweden to interview one of the Little Rock Nine. Just think of our potential to change the dialogue of African American achievement and involvement. That's why we call ourselves America's Missing Stories, but we don't want to be missing anymore. We want to mainstream this history.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to tell you what a thrill this is for me. Every once in a while, when I'm walking down the street, especially in Washington, a little black girl will come up to me and say, "I know you." She wants to talk to me. She wants to touch me. She wants to see, basically, if I'm real. Well, tonight, I am that little black girl, except that I'm in the presence of true greatness. I get to find out whether Diahann Carroll talks, walks. I get to touch her. I get to see if she's real, and so do you. And I have a little hint. Boy, is she ever. She is a living legend.
Things look swell. Things look great. Gonna have the whole world on a plate. Starting here, starting now. Honey, everything's coming up roses. Now's our inning. Stand the world on its ear. We'll start it spinning. That'll be just the beginning. Curtain on.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Diahann Carroll.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. How nice to see you. Mwah. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very nice. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, my goodness. Thank you. Oh, sit down.
The following program was funded in part by Toyota, AT&T, Baldwin Richardson Foods, Lincoln Financial Group, American Airlines. A complete list is available at thehistorymakers.org. She was born in Tennessee, raised in Ohio, and her career has transcended generations. Poet extraordinaire, spoken word artist, author, teacher, and activist. Her name, Nikki Giovanni. And the HistoryMakers, the nation's largest African-American video oral history archive, is proud to present An Evening with Nikki Giovanni. And now to our host, novelist and playwright, Miss Pearl Cleage.
Nikki Giovanni's earliest memory of me is as a young child in need of a babysitter. I used to try to tell her that this couldn't be true because she's only my senior by a few years, but she insisted. And after a while, I realized that our actual ages are completely beside the point. It's the spirit of our first meeting that's important. What she remembers is that when she first encountered me at my father's church on the west side of Detroit, Michigan, I seemed to her so full of youthful innocence and naivete that I was in need of a good babysitter. What I remember about her is that she was a girl poet from Cincinnati, outspoken, unapologetically female in a sea of macho males, who pulled up for her reading in a beat-up little car with her books in the trunk, a perfect afro adorning her head, and a grin on her face that said this was the best possible way to live your life if you were a woman in love with the careful arrangement of words on paper. And she was right. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, the words of Nikki Giovanni.
I was born in the Congo.
I walked to the Fertile Crescent and built the Sphinx. I designed a pyramid so tough that a star that only glows every 100 years falls into the center, giving divine, perfect light.
I am bad.
I sat on the throne drinking nectar with Allah. I got hot and sent an ice age to Europe to cool my thirst.
My oldest daughter is Nefertiti. The tears from my birth pains created the Nile.
I am a beautiful woman. I gazed on the forest and burnt out the Sahara Desert with a pack of goat's meat and a change of clothes.
I crossed it in 2 hours.
I am a gazelle so swift, you can't catch me. For his birthday present when he was 3, I gave my son Hannibal an elephant. He gave me Rome for Mother's Day. My strength flows ever on.
My son Noah built Newark, and I stood proudly at the helm as we sailed on a soft summer day.
I turned myself into myself and was Jesus. Men intoned my loving name. All praises, I am the one who would save. I sold diamonds into my backyard. My bowels deliver uranium. The fallings from my fingernails are semi-precious jewels.
On a trip north, I caught a cold and blew my nose, giving oil to the Arab world. I am so hip, even my errors are correct.
I sailed west to reach east and had to round off the earth as I went. The head on my hair thinned, and gold was laid across 3 continents.
I am so perfect, so divine, so ethereal, so surreal, I cannot be comprehended.
Except by my permission.
I mean, I can fly like a bird in the sky, 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 in the sky.
Please welcome Nikki Giovanni.
I didn't try.
You did good. We have been so excited about doing this. We've known each other for such a long time, so we've kind of had a good time getting ready for this moment when we invite you all into the conversation.
I cried when I first saw that. But I want to say something before you go on. See, Pearl always says I didn't babysit her because I'm not that much older than she is. But what she forgets is that the difference between 20 and 12 is it changes when you're 20 and 28, right? And when you get to be 40 and 48, right? It gets erased. You are actually now older than I am because, right? Because she's a grandmother and I'm not. And grandmother, right? So I did babysit her. I don't want you to think I was a coward, because I wasn't a coward. But Reverend Clegg would always look, he didn't want he didn't want Pearl and her sister home alone. And so he would say, who would keep my children? Well, quite naturally, I could go out into the street and get my head beat, right? Or I could babysit and be doing revolutionary duty. This was a no-brainer.
So this is the babysitter of my dreams. You've written hundreds of poems, and many of us have been moved by them for years. This one that our beautiful sisters started us off with is one that continues to be one of your more popular ones. What audience did you have in mind when you wrote that poem, and why do you think people still respond to it so enthusiastically?
Well, I grew up with and we all did actually, with a poem called Shine. Mm-hmm. And Shine is about the fact that the Titanic went down, there were no black people, right? But it's a male. For those of you who know Shine, and I could not begin to respond, but it's a dirty poem, but it's, shine, shine, save poor me, and I'll, whatever. And Shine swam on, right? But the men always had a way to say who they were. And you get tired of the little girls always doing the little Johnny Walker sat in the saucer, and they're always, looking to the east and west for someone to love them. And I thought, crap. Little girls, little girls need women. And so I wanted to write one of those poems for little girls. And the rule in writing is start at the beginning. And so I'm driving down to Livingston campus, and I'm driving, that's like, whoa, wait. I was born in the Congo. And once you get your first line, right? And it just, historic, I just made everybody, I just made everybody a black woman, right? Mm-hmm. So I got Christopher Columbus, because he's the one who sailed west to east, right? He's gonna have to round, the black woman is everything. And I just wanted to do that so the little girls could do it. Well, I volunteer a lot in daycare centers and stuff. Mm-hmm. And maybe 5 years after I'd written the poem, people were listening to it, and I'm delighted. But again, you don't have a sense of it. But I was at a daycare center, and they said, we want to perform for you. And so I was like, that's cool, because it's the first time you hear somebody call you Miss Giovanni, you feel old. But they were little kids. And a little boy got up, and I was born in the Congo. Because I never thought of boys liking that poem. And so the surprise and the delight, I knew I had a good poem once it was finished, but to know that I had a poem that inclusive was wonderful. And I think that's what's made it live, that it is an inclusive, it did not exclude anybody, because I think everybody's a black woman anyway.
I want to talk a little bit about your family. You were born Yolanda Cornelia Giovanni Jr. in Knoxville, Tennessee, and you're named after your mother. Who named you Nikki?
My sister did, but that's a part of the myth that we will never know, because Gary's only 3 years. Her name is Gary. There was Gary Ann, but we dropped that when we moved north. But it's something in the South that you people got two names for everything. But that's true. But Gary started calling me Nikki. My Aunt Agnes says that it's because they had a friend who used to kiss babies and say, "Give me a little Nikki," and she would kiss him on the neck, right? And that Gary misheard and thought that that was me. But Gary was only 3, so we don't know. But it's a cool name, so I've kept it. It works, but that's...
You didn't stay in Knoxville very long. Your family moved north, and you grew up in the Cincinnati area. Tell me a little bit about your parents, about how you all got to Ohio and what it was like growing up in Cincinnati.
We were actually a part of the Great Migration. But if you had asked me that 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said it like that. But my dad's family is from right outside of Mobile, Alabama. His mother's name was Maddie. And Maddie Jones moved the kids to Cincinnati. Gus had a job working with juveniles, in fact. And ultimately, my mother had a job teaching school.
What do you remember most about growing up in Cincinnati?
I grew up in Woodlawn, and we had an outhouse, and I've always loved outhouses. And I'm not a... That's true. That's true. I'm not a person who wishes she was rich. I mean, you got to put bread on the table and you got to have a car. My car is 17 years old, so things like that don't bother me. But if I would ever be rich, even yet, what I would do is I would build a round house, because it makes sense. And I would put all of my windows on the inside, right? And I would have a courtyard. And the reason that I would do that is that rich people make you crazy, because you end up being jealous because they have these big homes, and so people come in, they kill you, right? Or they rob you. And then you have to hire people to kill them. I mean, it gets so ugly when all you have to do is build a house and put it on the inside, right? And I would do that.
I like that.
Oh, yeah, it's something, it just stops a lot of confusion. But I would build my kitchen, of course, away, because, you shouldn't have to smell your chitlins, you shouldn't have to smell your, what you cooking, right? But I would also build an outhouse, because it only makes sense. And I would build, I'd have my bidet, I would have my bath, I'd have my sauna, I'd have, of course, my refrigerator, chilling my champagne and my Chardonnay, right? And I would have all that. And it's an outhouse. Architectural Digest would call me. No question. No question.
We're going to be looking for that house.
Yeah, no, you know what I'm saying? No, Oprah would be on the phone, girl, what you got? I want that. I'd be selling, because Oprah's rich, I'd be selling her my plans for a lot of money. That's the truth. My memory of the outhouse is of the fact that my mother had flowers. It was a traditional outhouse, right? And she had magazines in there. And what I liked about it was that if you went to the outhouse, nobody knocked on the door. Our next house, that was in Woodline, we lived on Fichet Street. Our next home had a regular situation. And there was always somebody wanting to come into the toilet. So I was like, aren't you finished? Get out of there. And so I'm having memories that I know don't make sense in a way. And I know that other people could look at it and say, you couldn't have been happy. But I was.
It's often true, I think, that there is one person in a family who gets it, who understands that this child is a little different, but she's a writer. And it's my understanding that your grandmother was that person in your family you. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about your grandmother?
Yeah.
And we got tissues, so you can cry all you want to. It's okay.
Yeah, I still remember grandmother's phone number is 31593. Yeah. I just don't know where we'd be without the grandmothers, period. Not just mine. One of the, you're not that much younger, but you look at civil rights just a smidgen different. But one of the things that definitely happened with people my age is that we had choices. We could tell our grandmothers we can't do it, or we could change the world. It was way easier to change the world. It was. I remember, and I never liked to picket. Some people got really high off of picketing. All of that stuff scared the crap out of me. But how was I going to tell grandmother I couldn't go and picket actually Richardson the first time I picketed?
And she volunteered you,
didn't
she
did.
For the demonstration?
They went to, there was, but they went the day that the kids were bombed in Birmingham, right? And that was a Sunday. And grandmother was one of those, because she would do that, and it was very annoying. I loved it, but that was annoying. And she would say, stay home, get off the phone, do not stand in front of the window. And it's because, in a way, the Birmingham bombing was war. And all of the old women, that's when adults were adults. All of the old women and men went to churches all over Knoxville, because I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, and they were trying to decide what to do, and they decided to picket. And of course, they were, Reverend James, Mount Zion Baptist Church was looking for volunteers, and grandmother was first to stand up, right? And when she came in the house, grandmother had one of those looks, you always know. And when she came home, I was sitting there waiting to see what was going on. And she said, Nikki. And I thought, I recognized the tone. She said, Nikki, we decided we're going to picket. And I said, yes, grandmother, because that was the answer. Then she said, and they called for volunteers. And I said, yes, grandmother, she said, and I told them, John Brown and I, because that's my grandfather, John Brown and I were too old, but my granddaughter was here. And she's gonna be there. She said, now you go on to bed, because get up in the morning and I'll give you breakfast and you'll go on up, and Grandpapa, John Brown and I will take a cab and we'll come and watch you later. I said, yeah, later I'll be dead, grandmother. But she didn't, I did. Who wants to go picket? Nobody did, but how was I gonna tell her, well, actually you made a mistake. I did mention, I said, does mommy know you're trying to get me killed? But she gave me a hug and thought I was kidding.
Was that your first demonstration? Was that your first experience with absolutely confronting racism in a direct way?
No, that was my first picketing, because I grew up at that age. People had begun picketing. We picketed even in Cincinnati against some of the things in the South. See, my sister integrated Wyoming High School. And what we remember about Wyoming High School and that is that Gary was there in Wyoming High School when Emmett Till was killed. And when Emmett Till was killed, everybody was upset, but there were only 3 black kids, Jimmy, Beverly, and Gary are the only 3 black kids, right? And so they wanted they were in sociology class, and they wanted them to say something about it. The sociology teacher said he got what he deserved, right? So they walked out, right? And so Gus went he went up to the school board and he said, I want Bradbury fired. And so what they decided to do, they had to work out a compromise. Could he apologize? And they accepted that. But you get scarred by things like that. And so he and Mommy, in talking things over, just decided they had given a child to integration. Sent me to grandmother thinking I would be safe. Never realizing that, one, there is no safety. I mean, if there's one thing my grandmother did for me, I know that there's no safety. I mean, even now, I fly in planes, and you have to take off your shoes and open your mouth and do all them crazy things they ask you to do. See, do you have a bomb? But I think the United States has a hell of a nerve to want to be safe when we're bombing people. By what right? By what right are you safe?
Amen. Amen. Your grandmother was such an important part of your life, and when she made her transition, you wrote a beautiful poem called Lady of Pleasure about your love for her and about your loss, and we're going to ask our young sisters over here if they'll say that poem for us.
Master, the tempest is raging, and are tossing high. The sky is all shadowed with blackness. No shelter or help is nigh.
Some small island birthed her, and a big, probably white ship took her from mother to come to America's recreation. She lives in the top of my building. I only know her through her eyes. She's old now, not only from years, but from aging. One gets the impression she was most beautiful, or like good wine or a semi-precious jewel touted out for the pleasure of those who could afford her recreation. Her head is always high, and though the set of her mouth shows it's not easy, she asks nothing, seems to have something to give, but no one to give it to, if ever she gave it to anyone. Age requires happy memories, like Lavinia smiled when she died, and though her doctor had told her not to, there was pork cooking on the stove. There are so many new mistakes for a lady of pleasure that can be made. It seems unnecessary to repeat the old ones. And it was cold that morning on the elevator when I spoke to her and foolishly asked, "How are you?" She smiled and tilted her head. "At least," I said, "the sun is shining." Her eyes smiled yes. And I was glad to be there to say through spirits, there is a new creation to her.
Master, the tempest was raging, and all the billows are tossing high. The sky is all shadowed with blackness. No shelter or hope is nigh.
Amen. Let's talk a little bit about Fisk. You enrolled at Fisk University twice. The first time you were expelled after a run-in with the conservative dean of women. Your grandmother was very much in your corner, but Fisk didn't really care about anybody being in your corner, and they asked you to leave. The second time, things had changed when you came back, and you were welcomed back. They expunged your record of being a troublemaker, and you started taking writing workshops with John O'Killens and reestablished a chapter of SNCC on the campus, so that your second experience at Fisk was very different. Can you talk a little bit about Fisk, about that first time there, and what really greeted you when you got there the first time?
Well, I was an early entrant, first of all, and I think it's a good program. I still think it's a good program. I also have to say, in all honesty and all fairness, and I have said it before, see, Fisk was right. I was wrong. And I was running roughshod over a lot of people. And the dean of women was wrong to kick me out, but I was wrong to push her. And so you had to learn something. You have to learn. And so I could sit here and say, I was right, but I wasn't. And I saw Dean Cheatham, as a matter of fact. I was in the Smithsonian recently, and a woman came up to me, she said, "You don't know who I am, do you?" And I try to usually be nice about it, but something said, "No, I don't." And I did. And she said, "I'm Ann Cheatham." And I said, "Hey, how you doing?" Because she was right, and I wanted to say that. Ann, you were right. And was I upset about it? Yeah. But it was time for me to lose at something. Because if I never lost, then I would never have appreciation for what I won. And I got kicked out of school, but I did get to travel. Civil rights movement was going on. I got a lot of good things. But I also realized, I don't look like Halle Berry. You know what I'm saying? I'm not drop dead gorgeous. I'm not, Serena or Venus Williams. I can't play anything. If I'm going to live, it's going to come. All of my strengths are here up, right? It's all in my head. So that means I have to go back to school. Could I have enrolled at University of Cincinnati or something? Sure. But if I'm having a failure at Fisk, then I need to go back to Fisk. So I borrowed a friend's car and drove down and wanted to meet the dean of women because I figured if I couldn't get along with the dean, I'm not going to make it the second time, so that's going to be a waste. And we talked, and she said, she pulled my record. She said, "My God, girl, what did you do?" Because the record is like that, right? I'd only been in school for, I said, I wasn't really good at taking a lot of stuff. I think I had a lot of anger. And if you think I'm bad now, there's a lot of things happening that make you unhappy. And I had to work through a lot of things. And I'm very patient, and a lot of people weren't. And Dean Cheatham and I had different visions of what a lady is and what a woman should do. And I say again, I was just lucky because I really love Jackie. I totally adored her because she said, "Okay, what do you need?" And I said, "Actually, I think I need an apartment," which was a no-no. For any of you Fiskites in the room, you didn't do that. And I'm grown. I need an apartment. She said, "Well, you can have an apartment if you don't tell anybody that you do." I said, "Oh, I keep secrets." I can handle that, and I did, because I'm too old to live with the dorm girls and that foolishness. So I didn't say that I did, and nobody else said that I did, and that worked. And what I wanted to do was actually, make Dean's List and live happily ever after, and we did that. I think Fisk was an excellent experience. There's sons and daughters ever on the altar. And Fisk University is an important institution, and it must be, it is. It is.
Did you know that you were a writer at that time when you were at Fisk?
Pearl, as long as you know, I still don't. I'm sitting down, I'm working on a new book, it's called Acolytes. And every day that I sit to work, I think, am I going to get through? I haven't taken anything, and I don't know why that one. That's not one that I can answer. But I don't take anything for granted. And I think I go at full tilt because I never know what's going to happen next. Tomorrow is not given.
How important was John O'Killen's workshop to you at that moment?
John Killens had the first Black Arts Festival at Fisk. And we had Leroy Jones, he was Leroy Jones then, Bob Hayden. It was wonderful. Negro Digest sent David Lawrence down. And David was a good friend. David was a wonderful man, right? And David asked everybody to write something, right? And so all of John's workshop got to write something. And we all sent it in, but mine got lost. So the Negro Digest came out and they couldn't find it. And you try not to be upset because I figured nobody deliberately, right? David finally realized I wasn't there, and so he called Jubilee Hall. He called and said, "We lost your piece." And I said, "Yes, you did." He said, "Well, you didn't call and complain." I said, "Well, David, I figured, it wasn't personal. You lost it." He said, "Well, if you'll write something else, I'll see to it that it gets in." So I said, "Thank you." It turns out to be great because instead of being one of 10 people, I now have my own byline. That was my first experience in publishing, and it was just very lucky that something like that happened. It was very lucky that I didn't complain, because if I had said to David, "What are you doing?" I'm just going to make him angry, and he didn't mean it.
Did you find that interaction with all those writers that came for that festival, did that help you at all? Did that push you in any direction or another to have Leroy Jones and all of the folks who came there to be at the festival interacting with you?
We just screamed when Roy walked into the room, because, that's when he was up against the wall, Melvin B. Tolson was there. And Melvin Tolson is probably the most underrated great writer in America. And Tolson has that wonderful line, "When the skins are dried, the flies will go home." And it always stayed with me. It's libretto for Liberia. And it always stayed with me, so I learned a lot. Of course, Gwen Brooks came down, I knew Gwen, you know, and we met Dudley Randall, and Dudley solicited, though I did not participate in that, solicited for Malcolm X. And I did not know Malcolm. I didn't have the opportunity. I did know Betty, and Betty is, of course, my sorority sister. But I never had an opportunity, so I didn't want to write at that point about Malcolm because everybody had remembrances, and I didn't know him. So I did not, but I did get to meet Dudley. So it was wonderful. I mean, those were good years.
And then you worked with Dudley Randall at Broadside Press. They actually distributed your second book.
They did.
Was that helpful to have a publisher after doing everything independently? Because I do have such a great memory of you and some of the other writers who came around that time to Detroit with your books in the trunks of these little cars. It seemed like everybody had a little broken up Volkswagen. But having a publisher who actually would help in distribution, did that make a difference in terms of getting your work in the hands of people?
Yeah, it did. I'm so very proud of the self-publishing industry, because I think that I had a lot to do with helping people see that you don't have to wait on other people to come to you. You can do it. And of course, you know, you have to give so much credit to a young woman named Zane, because Zane is a brilliant young writer. Elin Harris is a brilliant young writer. He did the same thing. What we were doing is publishing ourselves. What we needed, or what I thought, because on that level you have to put your business hat on, we needed a central distribution place, right? So if I would publish the book, I could control the paper, the quality of the ink, the color, I could control everything. I could get it to Dudley, right? And then Dudley could distribute it. Now, this means one thing, boys and girls, what does this mean? Nikki doesn't make any money, right? Because there's no way to make any money if you do that, because if you're going to make money, then your book is selling for more than anybody else's book is selling for, and that's not going to work, right? So I decided to go for the length, right? I just said, okay, I'm going to get the book out there, and I'll worry about the money at some other time.
And how much were they selling for? Because that's what I was going to say. I have it cost, because the little dollar is up in the corner.
But
that all of those books cost $1. Yeah,
$1 was a lot of money. But I was at Columbia, and I had been in social work school, which was like not going to happen, and it wasn't. I was very fortunate in my later deans, because Dean Louise Shoemaker took me out to lunch one day. She said, Nikki, you know, we need to go to lunch. And it's like, okay. And I'm happy because I'm doing good papers. And she said, you know, we love reading your report. We love everything. She said, but you know, you're not going to be a social worker. And I said, I did. I was about to get fired. I said, I fear you may be right. She said, you know, you don't report. I had a group, for those of you, I had a group, and one of my girls got pregnant. My supervisor says to me, you didn't write up what's her name was pregnant. And I said, but she's not pregnant. She said, well, she was. I said, but she's not. And if I write it up, when she runs for governor of Delaware, somebody will dig it up, right? And he said, well, your loyalty is to the agency. I said, no, my loyalty is to a girl who had a eraser on her pencil. And so I knew I was going to get fired. Louise knew I was going to get fired. And you also all have to know I didn't have any money, right? And so Louise said to me, she said, I did something I probably shouldn't have done. And she said, I sent your writings up to Columbia. She said, I have a friend at Columbia. And I sent them up to Columbia for the MFA program. I said, oh, Louise, thank you, but I can't afford the MFA program. She said, well, I thought that. And so I took the liberty of applying for a scholarship for you.
I'm very glad they told you not to be a social worker, because we all, I think, are grateful that you're writing.
Oh, it's fun. It's good.
This time that we're talking about was definitely a time of political upheaval and introspection for us as Black people, and unrest. And some, I think, would say that this was actually a time of Black judgment. And we're going to let the girls kind of give us another poem.
Childhood remembrances are always a drag if you're Black. You always remember things like living in Woodlawn with no inside toilet. And if you become famous or something, they never talk about how happy you were to have your mother all to yourself, or how good the water felt when you got your bath from one of those big tubs that folk in Chicago barbecue in. And somehow, when you talk about home, it never gets across how much you understood their feelings as the whole family attended meetings about Hollydale. And even though you remember, your biographers never understand your father's pain as he sells his stock in another dream goes. And though you're poor, it isn't poverty that concerns you. And though they fought a lot, it isn't your father's drinking that makes any difference, but that everybody is together and you and your sister have happy birthdays and very good Christmases. I really hope no white person ever has cause to write about me, because they will never understand. Black love is black wealth. And they'll probably talk about my hard childhood and never understand that all the while I was quite happy.
We went there to confer on the possibility of blackness and the inevitability of revolution. We talked about black leaders and black love. We talked about women and black men. No doubt, many important resolutions were passed as we climbed Malcolm's ladder. But the most valid of them all was that rap chose me.
Did you ever see a conflict or feel a conflict in your own life between being a writer, being an artist, and being the radical revolutionary force that you were? Did they work together, or did you see them as in conflict ever in your work?
I just always thought that this was my contribution. And a lot of things, I mean, to see rap really bothers me, touches me probably more than anything, because he should not be in jail. He should be teaching classes someplace. See? No, he's a great man, and history will bear that out, and that's a great loss, that he's sitting there rotting like that. But
talk a little bit about him at that conference. So many young people really don't know much about Rap Brown. They didn't see him
Rap
at those
Brown
moments.
is the reason that we talk about rapping, because he rapped. And he would do that thing with his, this young brother, he would do that because he's from Alabama, got that brogue. And of course, he's very charismatic, and rap didn't back off of anything. Rap did not know compromise. And you really did wish that somehow in talking to them, you wish that you could have tempered it somehow. It just never did. I mean, they shot Rap. I mean, you remember that. And they were going to kill him, going to do what they did. They were going to lie and put him in jail. And it's a loss, because Rap is one of the best thinkers of his generation, and that's reality. So you're very sorry that I'm sorry about prison, period. It's a bad idea getting worse. It was a bad idea when it was a new idea. It's a worse idea now that it's an old one. And I hate that we are privatizing prisons, therefore guaranteeing that we're going to put people in prison. And we're doing a really vicious thing with the middle class, which, again, my generation, since we all went to jail, everybody went to jail. But now the middle class is like, I didn't go to jail, and so they don't want to be bothered with the brothers and the sisters who are in jail. And that's a shame, because the people are in jail because, you happen to be there. And that's not to say that you want to just pick up your, next door neighbor, who is a murderer or a rapist or something. I'm not trying to say that. But I am saying those people need to vote. Prisoners need vote. They need all of the rights and responsibilities of citizenship so that they can rejoin us. Yes. It's so important that we rethink. It's so important that the black middle class quit being afraid of being black.
Amen. You have such a clear idea about your work as part of the struggle that we're involved in as black people. Do you feel that same kind of commitment, that same kind of energy from contemporary black writers, from young writers today, that same connection to a movement, that same connection to a force for change that you felt when you were writing Black Feeling, Black Talk?
I like what the kids are doing because they're business people. And if there's one thing that the black community has proven, I mean, that's Detroit, that's Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have proven that we are good business people. Our generation was not good business people. That's not what we did. We were good civil rights people. But now the kids that are coming are good business people again. You look at Russ Simmons, you look at Puffy, they are not just doing their entertainment thing, they are also doing restaurants. Puffy's got a restaurant here. They're also doing clothes. They're also expanding and being able to hire people. They're being able, you look at Queen Latifah, she started off, she's reading a little poetry. She goes to Hollywood. She's helped to change Hollywood. And so it's been wonderful to see what the kids have done because they've changed it. Because if the the rappers can put 5,000 seats, they can put bodies in 5,000 seats, then Hollywood has to say, now what kind of movies do we make to make this work? And it works. It's important. Somebody will say, well, Nick, I don't like Fat Beach. You see what I'm saying? Because it's not made for you. It's made for young people. You all are too old. It ain't about you and me. You know, I was so hurt because the brilliant group who's right here, Outkast, and I so admire Outkast. I was so hurt that Rosa Parks' people got involved in this thing with Outkast because it was so ugly, because we know, come on now, we know that Mrs. Parks does not wake up and turn into WAOK right?
And listen to
and listen to what's being, no, somebody had to bring this to her, and somebody brought it to her the wrong way because Outkast was giving her a shout out. They were saying, you know, we want the younger people to know who you are. It's very important. It's true.
How do you bridge that gap between those of us who are older and the young people who are making that music? Because I know for many of us, once your kids are old enough to get out of the house, you turn that radio back to another station and you don't hear their music as often as you used to. How do you bridge that gap between us and them?
Well, I just basically, because I teach and I'm lucky that I try to pay attention. But if you ask me, I mean, what's in my CD? You see that?
It's gonna be
now, I'm gonna show my
Bobby
age. What's on my iPod? What's in my CD right now, right? Gene Ammons, right? I mean, I'm listening to old John Coltrane, Mingus. I can probably get the other two because I have a 6-changer. I'm listening. I'm listening to jazz, right? Because that's what I listen to. But I'm also knowing not to judge what I'm hearing about what the kids are hearing. Because my mother did not like Ray Charles. My mother thought, why, as she said to me, does that Negro always stutter and shout? You know, because I'm a fool. You know, why is that? That's what she said. Why does that Negro always stutter and shout? But my grandmother didn't like Billy Eckstine, because Billy Eckstine used to sing a song, said, jelly, 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 jelly stays on my mind. And my grandmother knew that to be a dirty song. It took me the longest while I realized he wasn't talking about bread and butter. But that's the truth. Every generation dislikes the music of the next generation. That's the truth. And so you let that roll. You know, you have to ask the kids. You have to see how they are responding to the music. What is it doing for them?
You recorded an album reading your poetry with the New York Community Choir years ago, Truth is on Its Way. Yeah. Did reading the poetry with a choir, with live music, change your experience of the words because the music was so much a part of what you were doing? Well,
again, I grew up in the Baptist church, and the one thing that I loved always was the choir, was the gospel choir. I liked the anthems, but I loved the gospel choir. And I would never, ever, ever miss church on the Sundays that I knew the gospel choir was singing. So I grew up, no, I mean, you know, your grandmother wouldn't let you miss anyway, but I paid attention. And I always liked what they were doing. So I wrote, and I always knew that, and I still do. I write to music, but I did the gospel because Ellis Hazlett did soul. And Ellis, I did a lot of favors for Ellis because I was like a gopher on soul. And again, I learned that for everybody's young, forget getting paid. If you can get the position, everything else is going to work. And so I was working on soul. I did a lot of things for him. And he finally said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, what I'd like to do is something with gospel music. Now, grandmother was dead, of course, but what I wanted to do was something in her memory. And so that would be gospel music. So she was singing Peace Be Still, right? And that was a song that always fascinated me because, again, it was the longest before I realized it was peace, comma, be still. Because I always thought it was peace, be still, as opposed to war, be troublesome. Right? And you know, Jesus is out on the lake, right? And he says, you know, peace, be still. But I was looking at it in the larger context. So I wrote the great Pox Whitey to Peace Be Still. It was James Cleveland. I met James. James was a good cook. And he was a wonderful man. And James came to New York shortly after I had made the recording. James came to New York, and he was at Madison Square Garden. He sold out because he's Cleveland, you know. And he said, and now we're going to do that song that everybody's singing, right? And I'm backstage, so when he comes off, I said, James, everybody's not singing that song, only you and I. He said, I know, baby, I know.
But they will.
He was a great man, the Prince of Gospel. He was a great God, he could sing.
Let's talk a little bit about gender. Does gender have as large a part in your work as race does?
Jenny Fowler, who is a critic and a good friend, says that everything that I write about is about the world as a black woman, that there is no gender, that is all, I look at the world as a black woman, so I'm always writing through that. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I realize a lot of images, if you just read my work individually, you would see a lot of male images, because the male images are universal. So I even will talk about, for example, King, and you'll see King all the way, through. Or you'll see Emmett. I write a lot about Emmett, right? And it's not that there aren't other people. It's that you're using the images that everybody can use, but I'm always looking through the eyes. So I always think of everything as coming through the eyes of a black woman. Because to me, if you say, who am I am a Southern black woman, very much grounded in the women of my grandmother's generation.
What do you think that we have put forward, our generation, to replace those things that we watched our mothers do and our grandmothers do? Is there anything that we've created that steps into that void?
I don't see it. I see us struggling in our 60s to try to figure out now, having done a good job at what we set out to do, what do we now do? Our socialization has been very different because so much of our youth was spent in public. I don't know if people actually appreciate how much we all grew up, mm-hmm. whether known or not, in public. All of our mistakes mm-hmm. were public mistakes. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the reasons that I have such a sympathy for some of the young women that we're seeing now, yes. because they too are growing up, and you can't condemn people for doing the same things that everybody else did. Mm-hmm. And we had to grow up in public. I look at my friend Julian Bond. Julian grew up in public mm-hmm. and remained sane. And we all have problems, mm-hmm. right? But he's a committed man. Mm-hmm. And I'm so happy that he took over the NAACP, that he remained doing that. Somebody could say, well, Julian, divorced his wife or whatever, but you get married, you have to get divorced. What the hell?
You've appealed to a whole new generation with your understanding and your support of hip hop, and Tupac is certainly a part of that. And his death, Tupac Shakur's death, hit you hard, and you wrote about that. So I'm going to ask our young sisters if they will share that poem with us, and we'll talk a little bit about Tupac.
As I tossed and turned, unable to achieve sleep, unable to control the anxiety, unable to comprehend why Tupac is not with us. If those who live by the sword die by the sword, there'd be no white men on earth. If those who lived on hatred died on hatred, there would be no KKK. And if those who lived by lies died by lies, there'd be nobody on Wall Street, in executive suites, in academic offices instructing the young. Don't tell me he got what he deserved. He deserved a chariot and the accolades of a grateful people. He deserved his life. It is as clear as a mountain stream, as deafening as a thunderstrike, as terrifying as Thunder vampires. Tupac told the truth. There are those who wanted to call it dirty gangster rap, inciting. There are those who never wanted to be angry at the conditions, but angry at the messenger who reported your kitchen has roaches, your toilet is overflowing, your basement has so much water the rats are in the living room, your house is in disorder, and Tupac told you about it.
What a beautiful boy. Graceful carriage, melodic voice, sharp wit, intellectual breath. What a beautiful boy to lose. Not me. Never me. I do not believe East Coast, West Coast. I saw the murder Malcolm X. I saw the murder Emmett Till. I saw the murder Martin Luther King. I witnessed them shooting Rat Brown. I saw them beat Leroy Jones. I saw them fill their jails. I see them burning churches. Not me. Never me. I don't believe this is some sort of mouth action. This is some sort of political action, and they picked well. They picked the brightest, freshest fruit from the tallest tree.
What a beautiful boy. But he will not go away. As Malcolm did not go away, as Emmett Till did not go away. Your shooting him will not take him from us. His spirit will fill our hearts. His courage will strengthen us for the challenge. His truth will straighten our backbones. You know, Socrates had a mother. She too watched her son drink hemlock. She too asked, why? Tupac has a mother. The lovely Afeni had to bury her son. It is not right. It is not right. This young warrior is being cut down. It is not right for the old to bury the young. It is not right.
This generation mourns Tupac, as my generation mourned Till, as we all mourned Malcolm, this wonderful young warrior. Sonia Sanchez said when she learned of his passing, she walked all day, walking the beautiful warrior home to our ancestors. I just cried, as all mothers cry, for the beautiful boy who said he and Mike Tyson would never be allowed to be free at the same time, who told the truth about them and who told the truth about us, who is our beautiful warrior. There are those who wanted to make him the problem, who believed that by silencing Tupac, all would be quiet on the ghetto front. There are those who testified that the problem wasn't the conditions, but the people talking about them. They took away band, so the boys started scratching. They took away gym, so the boys started breakdancing. The boys started rapping because they gave them the guns and the drugs, but not the schools and the libraries. What a beautiful boy to lose. And we mourn Tupac Shakur, and we reach out to his mother, and we hug ourselves in sadness and in shame. And we are compelled to ask, are you happy, Miss Tucker? Tupac is gone. Are you happy?
Can you articulate for me why you think Tupac struck such a chord in you? You actually have Thug Life tattooed on your arm after he died.
I did,
What is it that, that touched you so deeply about him?
First of all, you know, I spent time in prison, in correctional institution with young people, in women's prison. I do a lot of volunteering. Everybody likes Tupac. If I could go to high school and I'll mention Tupac, everybody likes Tupac. So I go to college, you know, and you started, there's no way to avoid the breadth of this young man. And it's the love. When you start to talk to people, you know, it's the love that they felt about him, that they felt that he was given to them. Everybody feels warm about Tupac, that listened to his work, that heard him. And it's very unusual. You know, I'm not against any other rapper or anything like that. It's just very unusual that you can go into almost any venue and people will say, yeah, I know his work, I liked it. And I thought, wow, I got the tattoo because I thought my generation should mourn with the younger generation. And I thought that we should do something to let them know we do understand that this is a loss. Tupac is a loss.
How do you respond to people who recognize his genius as an artist, as a very charismatic performer, but have serious problems with some of the attitudes toward women that come through in some of the music that he did?
But see, I'm an old blues person, so I'm understanding what you're saying, but 90% of the blues songs, my man, he don't love me, or she done something to me, right? It's the metaphor. Women are the metaphor of America. I'm not backing off of anything like that. And so you end up with the rappers are doing the same thing. Do I wish they would read a little bit more and bring some other images in? You bet. But women are always going to be. But if you talk again to the women, you talk to the, girls, they are not feeling excluded by what he's saying, that they are not feeling an attack by what he's saying. And so again, I have to step back as an older person to say, okay, I'm not really comfortable with some of the things that MWA said, for example. You know, it's like, I don't think I really want to bop down the highway listening to that. But that doesn't mean that the entire genre or the entire body of work is without merit. I can't believe that.
Do you think that there's a space for those of us who may have problems with some of that, not just in his work, but in the hip-hop world? Is there a way that we can communicate more directly with some of the artists, or should we just, as the older generation, just kind of say, go on, children, make your music?
No, I think you should probably go out to a couple of the clubs and watch and see what's happening. I think that when we have the opportunity to talk to people, Essence Magazine gave me the wonderful opportunity because they do these conversations, speaking of Queen Latifah. And they asked Queen Latifah who would she like to talk to, and she said me. And I just couldn't have been more delighted, but she's working on a movie, right? I'm an old woman, you know, I'm busy. And so, no, I mean, you try to, you know. Sure. So I got on the plane, and I said, because she didn't have time to come to Virginia, I said, I'd be happy to fly to California. So she was saying, oh, you know, it's so nice of you. I said, no, it wasn't so nice of me. I am supposed to be there for you. And I have the time where you don't. There was a time that I wouldn't have had the time. But that's what we do. We allow them to reach back. You know, I've been trying to connect with Jill Scott because she's a great kid.
Love it.
And it's just that there are things that are going on. And we who are older, of course we should be involved. You know, would I have a good time every night going to a club and listen to a rapper? No. I'm way too old. But I have been in some of both the comedy clubs, which comedy can be very vicious and nobody complains about that, and in the hip hop, you know, and watch the slams and things like that. You get a lot of different things, but you also, by being a part of it, can recognize where you want to take it and what you want to say about it. Because what the kids are trying to do is live. And they're trying to live and they're trying to say what they think. Now, sometimes I don't believe that many drug dealers who actually were this good at rapping. I think that, I think the drug dealers deal drugs and the rappers rap. And so they need to, you know, some of the lies need to stop. Everybody didn't have a hard childhood, and if they did, suck it up and go on.
Amen. Amen.
That's true. But
you were saying that what they're trying to do is live, and this is definitely a time in our country when lives are at stake and lives are being lost every day, and our country is bombing people and at war all over the world. What do you see as the writer's role in wartime when our country is doing all of the things that our country is doing, and we are citizens of the country? Do you think that writers have a special role in a critical time like this?
Whatever I'm a citizen of, it's Earth, because otherwise you get stuck in this 15th century concept of who you should be. Because you happen to be born someplace, all of a sudden you owe an allegiance? I don't think so. The only people who have been in a space with no known landmarks and no expectation of positive welcome has been the Africans who were on their way to being enslaved in America. These people were a courageous and a brave people. They had to come through stormy waters with some really mean people that they recognized that. They had to stand on an auction block and be oiled up and sold and branded and marched to a plantation and they expected themselves to remain sane. They had to reimagine themselves. If Earth intends to fulfill its prophecy of the 21st century, we're going to have to learn from those people, because space is middle passage. We're going to have to learn from those people. How do you maintain yourself when everything that you knew is gone? The key to sane life on Earth resides in those Africans who made middle passage. These were great people, and we have just begun to tap into what they're bringing to us.
I want to read you a quote from James Baldwin that sounds a lot like what I think about your work. And Baldwin wrote, "You write in order to change the world, knowing perfectly well that you probably can't, but also knowing that literature is indispensable to the world. The world changes according to the way people see it, and if you alter, even by a millimeter, the way people look at reality, then you can change it." Before we close for the evening, would you say one of your poems for us?
Oh, I'd be delighted.
Thank you.
I only want to be there to kiss you, as you want to be kissed when you need to be kissed, where I want to kiss you because it's my house and I plan to live in it. I really need to hug you when I want to hug you as you like to hug me. Does this sound like a silly poem? I mean, it's my house, and I want to fry pork chops and bake sweet potatoes and call them yams because I run the kitchen, and I can stand the heat. I spent all winter in carpet stores gathering patches so I could make a quilt. Does this really sound like a silly poem? I mean, I want to keep you warm, and my windows might be dirty, but it's my house. And if I can't see out sometimes, they can't see in either. English isn't a good language to express emotion through, mostly, I imagine, because people try to speak English instead of trying to speak through it. I don't know. Maybe this is a silly poem. I'm saying it's my house, and I'll make fudge and call it love and touch my lips to the chocolate warmth and smile at old men and call that revolution, because what's real is really real. And I still like men in tight pants because everybody has something to give and, more important, needs something to take. And this is my house, and you make me happy. So this is your house.
Thank you.
For more information or to order your own copy of An Evening with Nikki Giovanni, please visit thehistorymakers.org or call 866-914-1900. That's 866-914-1900. The preceding program was funded in part by Toyota, AT&T, Baldwin Richardson Foods, Lincoln Financial Group, American Airlines. A complete list is available at thehistorymakers.org. The following program was funded in part by Toyota, AT&T, Baldwin Richardson Foods, Lincoln Financial Group, American Airlines. A complete list is available at thehistorymakers.org. Born in Washington, D.C., she would become one of the most respected mezzo-sopranos of her time. Her name, Denyce Graves. From the Metropolitan Opera to international opera houses and stages around the globe, her career has been legendary. The HistoryMakers, the nation's largest African-American video oral history archive, is proud to present An Evening with Denyce Graves. And now to our host, award-winning actress, Angela Bassett.
Denyce Graves is a wonderful woman, an amazing performer, and a good friend. She stands on strong shoulders. Denyce's elegant stage presence and her rich vocalism are wrapped in a casual girl next door demeanor.
Et c'est bien avec l'appel, s'il lui convient de refuser. En effet, mais sous prière, l'un parle bien, l'autre se tait. C'est l'autre que
Denyce Graves. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's always so good to see you, and I don't
too,
get to
Angela.
see you as often as I'd like because you travel the globe all year, every year, in and out.
It's pretty busy,
It
but I'm
is.
having a good time.
We're going to have a good time
Yeah.
tonight as well. Denyce, do you remember the occasion on which we met?
Well, I do remember when we met. We met at church.
That's right.
You were a friend. We went to church together, and we came to meet you at your home on Sunday morning, and then we went to go eat a gigantic brunch afterwards. I remember that.
That's right. I was new to opera, so it was like my introduction. And yes, a dear friend introduced us, and it was wonderful. And I've been to opera ever since. Whenever you're in town, and you come often, and I love it.
Thank you.
I also remember once seeing you at a state dinner in your hometown, Washington D.C., many years ago, and I was fortunate enough to sit at the table with the vice president, and I looked across the room, and there you were, and you were sitting next to the president. And I wasn't jealous, I was proud as can be. And here we are, next to each other tonight. Now, let's go back in time a little bit. You were born, Denyce Antoinette Graves, in Washington, D.C., 1964. Could you give us an indication of maybe the sights and sounds and smells of your household then?
I remember the smell of cooking, of fatback cooking and collard greens, and the smell of hair frying with the straightening
The pressing
comb.
comb, yeah, sounds familiar, smells familiar.
Yeah, and the sounds of laughter, less machinery, more human noises, less cars and that sort of thing, more people walking and laughing and girls jumping rope outside and that sort of thing.
Roller skates and playing
Exactly,
tag
and bicycles and all that, yeah.
Now, you're one of three.
I am.
You have an older brother and a younger sister.
I do, I'm sandwiched right in the middle.
Right, and
Yeah.
we have another thing in common. I was raised by a single mom, and you were as well. Do you think about that at times, what you may have missed or wonder about that?
We had a great time. My mother also was a lot of fun, She used to play Superman with us, and and football with us all the time, and she read us stories, and she was a terrific mother. So.
I know my mom, growing up, she was, of course, the disciplinarian, and she would say, in those moments, I'm your mother and your father, too.
Is that right?
Right. Yeah. And I know you did have an occasion of meeting your father later in years.
I did.
And
I did
tell
later
us
on.
about that.
We were outside taking photographs, and my mother, we were all standing there, was my brother, my sister, and some family members. And my mother said, oh my God. And we said, what? She said, do you see this man walking towards us? Yeah, that's your father. What? Oh my goodness. So that was and then we decided to have lunch together, which was rather strained, but I was glad that I remember thinking he was short and wore glasses. I thought,
Could he sing?
He could sing.
Okay.
According to my mother, that's how she met him, and that's how she fell in love with him, is that he was singing sort of in a barbershop quartet thing on the corner with a group of guys, and he had a lovely voice, so I think that was his great gift.
Can your mother sing as well? Does she?
She's here.
I won't ask her to.
She has the great love of singing.
But there was a lot of music growing up in your home, though.
Growing up in our home, my mother is deeply religious and only allowed gospel music in the house, and so we heard, Shirley Caesar and Mahalia Jackson and all those great James Cleveland and the Mighty Clouds of Joy and all the time. And so, and my mother also sang, and she still does sing quite a lot. And so music was very, very present and very much a part of our of everyday living.
I remember hearing from you once that not everyone, you know, thinks singing is the greatest thing at all times.
Oh, you remember the story
occasion. Yes,
right.
yes.
Well, I was a young girl. I don't know how old I was, maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9, and I went for a pajama party at a girlfriend's house. And I remember we were sitting at the table, and I was singing, and her mother said, "How rude, you know, don't you have any home training? You're singing at the table." And I thought, how sad that you don't.
Well, music took on a serious note in your life early on. Let's take a look at the videotape.
Okay.
As a young girl growing up in one of the poorest neighborhoods in the nation's capital, Denyce Graves wore her own brand of confidence. Noticing her middle child's voice, Dorothy Graves encouraged Denyce to sing in her Pentecostal church. In the future, Denyce's gospel singing would be rendered in a classical style.
Judgment Day. The sun is shining, come on, get happy.
But it all began in 1979 when a tall, thin girl realized she didn't quite fit on Galveston Street. Denyce auditioned and was accepted to the Duke Ellington School of the Arts. At 14, Denyce discovered a recording by Leontine Price in the school library. She cut her classes and listened for hours. As Leontine Price sang, Denyce remembers saying, "I can do that." When voice teachers heard her potential, Denyce Graves began the journey to develop her awe-inspiring gift of song. From the Duke Ellington School of the Arts, scholarships would lead to Oberlin College from 1981 to 1984 and the New England Conservatory from 1984 to 1988. But before settling in at the nation's most prestigious opera house, doctors would advise the young vocalist to stop singing to save her voice. It seemed like an early curtain call, but a year later, the Houston Grand Opera began to pursue Denyce. During a 2-year apprenticeship, she worked roles in the chorus, learning the role that would one day become her own. Denyce Graves became known as the new mezzo legendary tenor Placido Domingo had found. The girl with the voice from Galveston Street was back, and the rest would become history.
How about that? Leontine Price was an inspiration to you.
She was the inspiration.
Tell me what
Absolutely.
it felt like, and when was it that you heard her voice, and how that made you feel?
I was 14 years old, and I was late for a class, and I was running in the hallway, and I ran into a girlfriend of mine. This was when I was a student at the Duke Ellington High School, and she said, "Denyce, you've got to come hear something." I said, I can't, I'm late for class. She said, no, you've got, I just have heard the most beautiful thing that I've ever heard in my life. And so I went with her to the listening library, and we cut our classes the entire day and listened to Leontine Price sing. And I remember we never went to the bathroom, we never ate anything. I said, I would love to do that. To have, I mean, it really felt like I found my purpose in life, and it absolutely did direct the whole of my life from that point on.
Up until that time, you were, as you said, you sang mainly gospel and
Mainly
in
gospel
church.
music in the church.
In
That's
the
right.
bus ministry.
That's right. You remember that? That's right.
Right. Tell us about that.
Well, in our house, my mother was very, very strict. She still is, actually, very strict. And each night of the week was designated for something. So Monday night was sewing night, and Tuesday night was book report night. And that was in addition to our homework. Because she was working all the time, she wanted to make sure that our time was constructive, the time that we had away from her. And so she would assign us, you know, projects after we finished our schoolwork. Anyway, Thursday night was music night, and we'd write songs and that sort of thing, and we would perform them for her when she came home. And we started getting sort of good at that. And so we formed this little singing group called the Inspirational Children of God, and we went around and we sang in different churches on Sunday. But also, in addition to going to church, we weren't allowed to just go to church. We had to participate on a deeper level with our involvement. And so I was involved with the bus ministry, and that was basically speaking to parents and encouraging them to allow their children to come to Sunday school on Sunday mornings, and then we would go pick them up on the bus, on the church bus, and take them to Sunday school. But while we were on the bus, we sang songs and that sort of thing, and so that's what my job was, to sing the songs on the bus and entertain all the kids on the bus while we went back and forth to church.
Now, you've sang gospel then, opera now. What difference is there between the two in the training? At that time, you were at the Duke Ellington School of the Arts, which is very renowned high school, junior high school there for the arts. I have other friends from D.C. who've gone there, and they're quite talented. So a lot of great people come out of there. Yeah, but that's where you began to move from gospel into opera. What was that training like?
Classical music is such a refined art form. I think what's challenging about it is to maintain that initial desire that attracted you to music making in the first place, because you can become so analytical of every note that you sing that it can rob the joy of music making.
You're concentrating on the technique of it so that you can get away from the passion of it, what drew you in the first place.
I think it's really, that's the great challenge when you're actually learning to study the voice and learning what proper singing is and how to make beautiful, beautiful sounds, because that's what classical music is the art of beautiful singing. And there are lots of rules that go along with that. And so one has to, I think, stay in touch, because I believe that at the end of the day, and I am one of those opera singers who enjoy going to the opera. And even though I can hear people spin beautiful tones, and I appreciate that, and I can appreciate the gymnastics and all the virtuosity that goes into refined music making, for me, still, at the end of the day, I think that it's what moves people and touches them that brings them back to the opera house. So I think that it's important to stay connected to that, even though all of the training can sort of strip that away. It can do that.
After graduating from high school, from Duke Ellington, you went on to Oberlin School of Music.
That's right.
How did you get from DC to Ohio?
On the Greyhound bus, actually. Yeah, sure, that was a long journey. In fact, I had two professors at the Duke Ellington School who were alums of Oberlin College. Neither one were my professors. One was an oboe teacher and one was a flute teacher. But they had been very supportive of my work. They told me about Oberlin College and said, Denyce, you have to go to Oberlin, you have to go to Oberlin. And I went as a prospective student.
What was it about Oberlin that drew you there?
Well, I didn't know in the beginning. I just went because they said it was a fantastic school. And later, I learned all these wonderful things about the university, how it prides itself on this first university to accept African American, first university to accept women. It was a conservatory filled with all the weird kids. It was all the kids that everybody picked on and teased, and it was the kids that enjoyed music and enjoyed practicing and that sort of thing. And I think that there are a few times in your life where something rings true. People often speak of that when of their spouse. They say, the first time I saw this person, I knew that we were going to marry. And it was that same sort of recognition inside of my soul that the moment I was there, I walked into the conservatory, I thought, this is where I'm supposed to be. It felt right. Everything said yes.
How many years did you spend there?
Well, I spent 3 years there. I ended up getting my degree from New England Conservatory. Oberlin College at that time had a mandatory age retirement. And I was studying sort of with the hot voice teacher. And when I was there, I was asking everybody, when I was there as a prospective student, I was asking, who's the great voice teacher? Who's the teacher that everybody wants to work with? And I kept hearing this name, Helen Hodem, Helen Hodem. And so I met her while I was there, and I asked to sit in on a couple of voice lessons while I was there. But she had been such a draw for the conservatory for so many years.
Yes.
But she was sort of a mysterious age. And they had been enforcing this mandatory retirement for some of the other professors. And since they were enforcing it for other professors, they said, look, you can't do this for some and not for others. But because she had been such a drawing card for the conservatory, it was difficult for them to let her go. In the end, she was forced to retire from Oberlin College, and then went to teach full-time at New England Conservatory. There were about 14 of us who left Oberlin College to go to New England Conservatory to continue studying with her.
To find a professor, a leader, a teacher for such a delicate, such an important, you know, your voice is so important.
Exactly. As we were saying before, you know, you only get one set. I mean, you can buy a new piano, you can buy a new clarinet, but if you get that wrong, that's it. And so it really is about the relationship that you have with your voice teacher. And that is a very special one of great intimacy, and that requires great care. And when you find a relationship, I believe where there is an atmosphere of freedom, where you feel like you can experiment, and that you trust them also with your instrument, and you're not afraid of your instrument in front of them, I think it's one that you should hold on to. And that's also building the voice. I mean, she was a great voice builder. And I was making great progress with her, and I didn't want to interrupt what we were doing, particularly for my final year there. Go to another voice teacher who says, oh no, that's all wrong. You have to do it completely different. Yeah, start all over again.
No, you're at the beginning of your career. And of course, it was made possible by those who have come before you. And just for a moment, I want to look back at some of the work and how it paved the way for your success.
In 1990, the humble, legendary contralto Marian Anderson would present Denyce Graves with the Marian Anderson Award, symbolizing her kinship with the African-American divas and classical singers that came before. Ciceretta Jones, whose operatic work was only accepted through minstrel shows. Classical vocalists who trained without open venues for their work. Opera stars such as the regal, internationally acclaimed soprano Leontine Price, the dramatic, risk-taking Grace Bumbry, the celebrated, majestic voice of soprano Jessie Norman. These legendary vocalists paved the way for Denyce Graves. For its 1995-1996 season, Denyce Graves would make her debut at the Metropolitan Opera in the title role of Bizet's Carmen, coming in, as she would later say, through the front door. She would work often with Placido Domingo, even performing at the Royal Opera House in London. Many opera houses and patrons across the globe developed a passion for Denyce Graves' Carmen. The sought-after mezzo-soprano would also become known as the lead in Cézanne's Samson and Delilah. With an expanding repertoire, Denyce Graves joins legends, becoming one of the most respected classical vocalists of our time.
I love that photo of you and Marian Anderson.
Me too.
You were a baby then, and you had on some grown-up earrings.
Did I really?
You did, you did.
I was so grateful, and am so grateful that I had the opportunity to meet her and to spend time with her. I just won the Marian Anderson Award, but as a recipient of the award, you give a concert at her hometown where she was living at the time. And Sylvia McNair, who had previously won, was giving a concert that evening. And when that photo was shot, I said to her, "It's cold out here. Do you need something around your shoulders?" I remember that very clearly.
I know what Broadway means to the actor. What does the Metropolitan Opera House mean?
I think that every opera singer is looking at that house as sort of the standard, as the mother of all houses, and that if you're invited to sing there, if you work there, it means that somehow you have arrived. I think that concept is held by lots of different singers. I don't think that that's true. It's a magnificent house, and I'm honored to work there. Here in Chicago is a magnificent house as well, Chicago Lyric Opera, and I'm proud when I'm here, when I'm able to work here. But I'd been singing for years in Europe as an artist before I was invited to sing at the Metropolitan Opera, and there are lots of fantastic opera singers that may or may not be household names who do fantastic, wonderful singing actors and actresses who have never made their Metropolitan Opera debut for whatever the reasons may be. And that doesn't make them any less of an artist than some of the names that you may know. So while it is a great honor to work there, there are also lots of other wonderful houses.
Around the world.
Around the world.
And when you love it, it doesn't matter where you sing.
That's right. That's right.
You love it.
Yeah.
There was a time early in your career when you thought maybe it was cut short, that it possibly wasn't going to happen. You lost your voice.
That's right.
Do you remember how? Do you remember why? Or is it still a mystery?
Not anymore. At the time, it was a great mystery. I had won the Metropolitan Regional auditions in New England. And in between that time, it's sort of like the Miss America pageant, and they go around to all the different states, and they have this big competition, and whoever wins from that region goes on to New York for the nationals. And so I won from my region of New England. And in between that time, there was maybe a 3 or 4 month period before the national finals were held in New York City at the Metropolitan Opera. You stay there for 1 week. You coach with the coaching staff, with the whole music staff that they have there. You prepare for one huge concert. And then from that, the judges make their selection of maybe about 10 singers. And it was in this little window. I sang great for the regionals, and I won. I had to win.
Why? Why is that? Why did you have to win?
I was going to get evicted from my apartment. I was.
Was there a cash prize?
There was a cash prize.
Oh, okay.
And I said, I had one roommate who just sort of walked out and she disappeared, and everybody was sending in their rent separately, and we found out later they were like 3 months behind, and so we were getting ready to get evicted. And I found out about this competition, and it was a cash prize, and I said, I'm going to go win that competition. That's what I'm going to go do.
I got to keep the lights on.
I got to. That's right. Got to keep the lights on. I sang, and I sang well, but in between that time of the regionals and the nationals, I completely lost my voice. I completely lost. It was the craziest, most mysterious thing ever. What happened with me is that it became gradual. Something was wrong, physically wrong in my anatomy, that I saw 7 different voice doctors and nobody could figure out what it was. They saw a tremendous amount of phlegm on the vocal cords, and the body's so perfect that if there's something wrong, the body produces more phlegm to protect the cords. And so I kept saying that the more that I sing, the worse it's getting. Which was true, because the more that I was singing, the cords weren't well, and they weren't in a state of wellness. And so the more that I sang, it created more phlegm to protect itself. And so that's why the sound kept getting, and so I just completely lost the sound. And I saw all these doctors, and I saw even a witch doctor who told me somebody put a curse on me.
Looking for answers in every corner. How did you feel emotionally at this time? I mean, singing had been such a great part of your life up to
and
now.
I was getting ready for
And you were
this
so
huge
close.
competition at the Nationals. And I arrived there in New York, and I was singing the first day, and Larry Stayer, who had been a great supporter of mine at that time, said, Denyce, I'm sorry, this is not the voice that we heard a few months ago, and we're going to have to take you out of this competition. But I basically had to go back to Boston with my tail between my legs, and also not know what the problem was. I finally saw a doctor who realized that I had an imbalance of the thyroid and put me on some medication that regulated that, but that threw everything off.
You had to take a year off.
I took a year off, but I didn't know how long that would, how long it would be. And so at that time I'd already started with some small contracts, and I was very excited about that. And I had to cancel everything, and at that time I was working full-time as a secretary.
My. Well, this is the 50th year of Marian Anderson's debut at the Metropolitan Opera. And of course, happily so, history has moved past a time when African Americans were not allowed to sing on the stage of the opera houses or even to participate as audience members. Denyce, let's take a look at how you and your work are becoming a part of our future.
In an effort to educate, Denyce Graves has conducted master classes preparing opera singers for the future. She is known as one of the most highly esteemed African-American mezzo-sopranos on the current opera scene. Denyce Graves recently recorded with Latin American artists, bringing diverse works to the mainstream.
Quiero decirme canto como el ave. Quiero mi soledad.
In 2005, her repertoire took on a new territory with the lead role in Margaret Garner, based on the novel Beloved by Nobel laureate Toni Morrison, who returned to the story as a librettist with composer Richard Danielpour. This story of a real-life fugitive slave who attempted to kill her children rather than have them become slaves tells a compelling American story. For Graves, it is a time of new challenges and making history.
Wonderful role. I can't wait to see that. Can't wait to see you and Margaret Garner. How often do new operas come along?
Well,
I mean, we often hear of the same ones: Tristan and Isolde,
Exactly.
Aida, Tosca.
Right. And those are standards in the repertoire, and they'll be around forever because they're just so beloved, and the music is magnificent, and the work, I mean, they're real masterpieces. But there are a lot of new operas being created all the time, and lots of contemporary operas. The problem is, or the challenge is, making sure that those become the modern day Tristans and Toscas and that sort of thing. And I think that, I certainly hope so in the case of Margaret Garner, that's for sure. But I know that there's been there are great operas being written all the time, and people just have to hear them, and they have to come to the theater, you know.
Well, people certainly come from around the world to see you in Carmen. That is one of your, or dare I say, your signature role, and you are known and beloved for playing that passionate, alluring character. But you've also said that to sing Carmen is frustrating. Why is that?
Well, because all of the pretty music goes to everybody else.
Yeah, that could be frustrating.
Yeah, she's a magnificent personality. She's very attractive to a lot of singers because she is a personality of great allure. But from a singing standpoint, from an acting standpoint, it's also very attractive too, because there's a great emotional range that you get to sort of explore throughout the whole of the evening. But from a singing standpoint, it's very frustrating because the music is not what we say cantabile, which means singable. You know, the foil to Carmen, Micaela, gets all of the beautiful music. And also Don José gets all of the beautiful music. Carmen never has a moment alone. But certainly from a musical standpoint, for me, I find it frustrating because I think her music is angular, and it can be hard on the instrument.
If this is a hard role to sing, what measures do you take to protect it?
Fortunately for me, as we discussed earlier, and I think it is a gift when you have difficulty and when you have vocal problems, because you learn how to take care of the instrument, you learn how to care for it, you learn what not to do. And that takes a seasoning. It takes the experience of walking through it. You know, I had a professor who said to me, and it's so true, he said, Denyce, you'll never be judged on your best singing. You'll always be judged on your average singing. And you have to work to get your average singing above everybody else's. And that's what the challenge is. The day that you're in like the best voice, that's the day you're at home, you know, cleaning out your closet, you know? That's the day, you know, you're out at the movies and you think, God, where's Deutsche Grammophon now? That's the day is what the day I need to record Carmen, you know? But it's never when you have your Met debut. It's never when you have your Carnegie Hall debut. It's not, you know, because there's so many other things that come into play. And the thing that's so challenging about being a singer is that, first of all, you can't see the instrument. So you don't know how it's doing. You know, it's sort of this animal that I wait until I go into the dressing room on the night of performance to see what sort of voice I have that evening. Oh, today I need to make sure that I have a lot of lift here, and today I have to make sure that I really get my breath low, and all of those things which are part of your good vocal technique in the first place, but you have to modify that depending on how the voice speaks that day, because it is the body, and whatever you do to the body will be reflected in the instrument itself. It's difficult for us too, because either I'm preparing or recovering from something, and so it leaves very little time to sometimes live. I remember when I was studying with my voice teacher at Oberlin College, and I went in for a voice lesson one day, and she said, your voice doesn't sound good today. She said, yo, what were you doing last night? And I said, I was out with some friends laughing, and she said, you were laughing?
Oh, no.
The night before a voice lesson?
Not good. It's not good. Laughing is not good for the voice.
Not good, because you think that a cellist wouldn't be playing the cello from the moment that he woke up in the morning until he went to bed. But we're speaking, and oftentimes, we're not speaking as well as we sing. And by that I mean, when we're singing, we learn how to produce beautiful sounds. And we learn about placement, and we learn about focus, and we learn about squillo, and all these vocal terms that help place the voice and take the voice off of the vocal cords, because that's what you want, you want for there not to be pressure on the cords. But when we're speaking, we're laughing, how you doing, that sort of thing, and all of that's right on the cords. And if you're doing that from sun up to sundown, you're using the instrument, and that means that when you actually need it. And singing opera is heavy-duty stuff. It's major stuff. I mean, we're not singing with the enhancement of microphones and all of that stuff. It's just on the pure instrument itself. It's a natural art form. And so when you need that to be informed, it means that you have to conserve how often you're using the instrument, and you learn to take care of it. All you have to do is fall down one time really badly in an important performance and know what that feels like, to know that you never want to have to live that again. I'm still studying. I'm still learning about the voice all the time, and I find it amazing. The more that you do it, the more seasoned you become at it, and the better you become at it, hopefully, if you're singing well. And that's the great thing. That's the thing that I love the most about this business, is that you can't fake it. You cannot fake it. Either you know how to do it or you don't. It's not who you know. you've got to do the work. There's no cheating. There's no, you got to deliver, and everybody knows.
Now, you have said, and what do you mean, that you have the personality of a mezzo-soprano?
Yeah, I don't
What is
think,
the difference between that and the lyric soprano?
Yeah, well, I'm not dying of consumption and not very fragile and one of these, sopranos who are fainting and that sort of thing. I think that my personality, my temperament is much more like a bull. It's, like this, it's stronger, I think that I could play those parts, but I think that it's, I think that my fabric, my whole makeup, physical makeup, is stronger and reflects some of those women that I portray. And they have influenced me greatly too, and I've learned a lot from them and gained a lot of strength by knowing those particular women. I think the thing that's been most valuable to me with fleshing out these particular characters, and it sounds so simple, but it's the truth, is to learn to be yourself. When I met Leontine Price, I'd heard so many of her recordings, and I still listen to her, and I'm still fascinated by her, but I always felt that I knew her through her voice. I always felt that she was really giving us a great gift as to who she was. And when I was invited to her home, which is the two of us girls sitting around talking, I said to her, I knew this is how you were. I knew it. I knew it. I could hear it in your voice, And I think that's saying something, particularly being an African-American woman in what may be considered by some to be a European art form. I hear everything that she is in her singing. I hear that she's Southern. I hear that she's African-American. I hear that she's a woman. I hear that she has a great sense of humor. I hear that she's a great study, that she's very intelligent. All those things, to me, come across in her voice. And I think that to arrive at a place in a business where the business doesn't always welcome you, to learn in the end to be yourself on the stage through those characters, for me, was a great achievement.
Before the curtain rises, and I'm gonna take that journey with those performers. They're gonna make me believe because they believe. Right. I believe.
Right.
When I come through the door, I'm ready and willing to do that. I'm paying to do that. So when I look about in the opera houses, I see that it's very homogeneous. There's a lot of sameness, and it's very European. And there you are on the stage.
I have to digress. When you did that, I saw that woman who burned the clothes of her husband. I was like, oh yeah, this is Angela Bassett, yeah. That's true. You all know what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah, you do digress.
I love that. No, it's true.
Have you
it's
experienced
true.
racism
oh,
in the
sure,
opera world?
Sure.
How so? And what do you do about it?
I just keep singing with all the love in my heart that I can. I just keep singing. I just keep singing in the face of all that. Of course, I've experienced it, and I always will, and I think everybody always will. I mean, it's a, we're in
Have you ever been denied jobs because of it?
Sure. Sure. And I've had some general directors and intendants tell me very frankly, in which I appreciate it as well. At least I knew who was standing in front of me. So I appreciated that. And that'll, I don't expect that to change. I don't. But I mean, I think that if we want change, it's us who has to change. You know, it's an inside job. I can't do anything about anybody else and how they feel and what they think and what, nor do I want to. Nor do I want to. My job is to sing and to sing well and to make it impossible for them to say no.
We're judged so many times because of our age, because of our girth, our size, and you have a friend who's an opera singer. And there was an incident on a stage in Germany.
Oh, exactly,
yes.
That's right. Beautiful singer. Oh, she is, I would walk on glass to hear her sing. She is magnificent. And the top is of such exquisite beauty. But she is a very, very, very large woman. And we were doing a concert together in Germany. And when she was singing, I went into the audience because I love her voice. And when she came on stage, when she walked out on stage, everybody laughed. Everybody laughed when she came out. And when she opened her mouth to sing, everybody's jaws dropped. And that's the other thing that I said that I loved about the business, is that it's so pure, it's so honest. You know, it's about the beauty of the voice, you know? And nobody could deny what was coming out of her mouth. That you knew that when she sang, you could see the face of God. You just knew it, you know?
Yes, yes.
And, but it's true that it's not just that. It's a concert. Other people could stay at home and listen to a CD. And it also is a theater. And we are judged whether we're black, whether we're too tall, whether we're too short, whether we're whatever. We're going to always be judged about that. I cannot, and I refuse to waste my time and energy concentrating and focusing on that. I've got enough work to do on myself and to just keep maintaining a level of excellence. And that's where I'm focused on. So I don't care about any of that. And I just have my faith somewhere else. It's not in the business. And I believe that I say that I believe that this is a business that you don't choose. I think it chooses you. And I believe that I was called to do this. I know it. I know I was. I felt that right away. And I believe that this is taken care of, that it's in greater hands. Yes. And so I don't worry about it. I mean, I don't worry about it. And I've been confronted with it, and more and more. You know, we can speak about the great, and we have made tremendous progress, and I'm so proud when I see some of those clips of lots of other women who came before me, Aaron Anderson. And when I'm there at the Metropolitan Opera or any place, or here in Chicago Lyric, and I'm walking around the theater, I'm so proud to be there and so happy to be there. But you look around and you think, well, where are the men? You know, where are they? And they're there. They exist. And one of the reasons that I'm so proud of this piece, this Margaret Garner opera that we're doing as well, is that you do get a chance to see some fantastic African-American men. I mean, everybody can sort of quote to you Leontine Price and Kathy Battle and Jesse Norman.
Baird and Grace Brumbury.
And then for the men, everybody's quiet. Well, they exist. They exist, and they're out there in greater numbers than we know. But I just believe that we just have to keep singing, make it as beautiful, and as I said, to just hold on to that in whatever it was that ignited inside of you that drew you to this in the first place, to not lose that, to remember that the business of music making is less beautiful than the art form itself, right? But to hold on to that great beauty. Exactly. Yeah, that's what's important. And that's what touches people in the end anyway. And you can sing perfectly, and you can do all sorts of roulades and jump and do all sorts of vocal acrobat, and all that stuff is very impressive. But I think that at the end of the day, it's a person who touches you, who moves you in some way, because music has that power to express that which is inexpressible, to touch you at the deepest part of who we are. And that's why it's sacred.
Now, I know that there is another someone who has touched you at the deepest part, and this is a very new experience for you. You've become a mother. I'm sure, I can imagine that that has to have changed you, informed your work in some way, and how. As a busy opera singer, a diva traveling the world, do you manage to balance the two?
Well, you know, it's like when my voice teacher said you were singing, you were laughing on the night before a voice lesson. I didn't want to miss my life in the midst of all of this. I'm having a grand time, and I consider it a privilege and an honor to do what I do that brings me so much joy and so much beauty. I would do it were people listening or not. So I'm so grateful that I am able to make a living at doing something that brings me so much joy and hopefully brings joy to others as well. But I also didn't want to miss the human experience of just being a woman and being here. I didn't want to miss that. I didn't want to miss my life by spending so much time in the practice room that, you know, I would go away on my engagements, and I always thought, when I go home, I'm going to do this, and when I go home, I'm going to do that. And every time I came, well, first of all, I wasn't going home. And then every time I came back, my nephews were so much bigger, and I thought, when did this happen? You know, I feel like the same. Last time I saw you, you were 2, and now you're 18. You know what I mean? And life is passing by, and although I still feel like the same girl,
yes, yes,
time is passing in front of me, and I know it. And I see it even greater now through the eyes of my daughter.
After our nation's tragedy, September 11th, you were called to sing in the nation's capital for our National Day of Mourning, and you've also become and were asked to be a cultural ambassador for our nation around the world. What has that experience meant to you?
You know, when I was 15, I had the great privilege of being able to go to Germany as an exchange student. And I lived with a German family there. And that was an amazing experience. And the mother stayed at home. It was like one of these fairy tale stories. The mother stayed at home and prepared, you know, and she took care of the house and took care of the children while the father went off to work. But I remember her speaking on the telephone to a friend, and she said, "We have an American staying with us." And I said, "An American? I'm an American." I wasn't even an American in America, right? So for me, it was a great honor and privilege, because I feel that growing up, I mean, I think my life is the so-called American dream, because I find myself in an area of life that was very unlikely that someone from my upbringing would find themselves. And so, and I'm proud of that. And so I'm proud to go around as an American ambassador, because I also think that I bring a very different perspective. It's, you know, you have to go away to see what people really think about you, you know? Not everybody likes us, that's for sure. That's for sure. And, but I'm happy to sit down and speak with people and to share and to listen to them and to learn from them as well, and to try in one small way to extend the hand and to mend in some way if I can do that. That brings me a tremendous sense of pride. And then I think, now you're doing something really great with your life, Denyce. You know, that's really beautiful. So that was and is a great honor for me. I'm proud, even with all of the problems that we have, I'm still very, very proud to be an American, and very proud to be an African-American woman.
Well, I can say for sure, I know that you are representing us very, very well. And I thank you. And I know you spent a great deal of time on the road, so of course we have to thank your husband, and we thank little Ella, and I'm grateful to your mother for being there for you. And thank you so very much for being so open and so candid about your life and your experiences with us tonight. I really appreciate it. I've learned so much, and I'm sure our audience has learned a great deal about opera, and just rushing out to see it whenever you're in town. And I thank you also on behalf of all those little girls and boys who are somewhere right now singing their hearts out, and you are blazing a path before them. Thank you, Denyce Graves. Thank you.
So sweet. Thank you, dear.
You're welcome.
For more information or to order your own copy of An Evening with Denyce Graves, please visit thehistorymakers.org or call 866-914-1900. That's 866-914-1900. The preceding program was funded in part by Toyota, AT&T, Baldwin Richardson Foods, Lincoln Financial Group, American Airlines,